On this edition of Fulton at Work, Fulton County takes the lead at the Capitol on addressing one of the ugliest crimes committed against teens and adult women. We'll tell you how. Plus, we'll introduce you to a human trafficking survivor and to a group of women who donated hundreds of supplies for victims in need. I'm Daryl Carver. All this and more on Fulton at Work. Please stay with us. Welcome. Welcome to our program. I'm Daryl Carver. Fulton's top leaders in government and the justice system are addressing a major concern plaguing the county. That is, the issue of human trafficking. From the state capitol to Fulton's communities, county staff and county partners are bringing awareness to this heinous crime. FGTV's Priscilla Ortega brings us our coverage.
The Anti-Trafficking Council, led by the organization Youth Spark, came here to the Capitol to thank legislators for passing the Safe Harbor bill last year. Now that legislation protects exploited children from being charged as criminals. But now the Anti-Trafficking Council, including those who are directly impacted by human trafficking, are raising awareness about another hurdle.
All I knew was that someone had my daughter, and I just needed to know what was going on.
With tears running down her face, a mother whose teenage daughter was lured into human trafficking is joining Youth Spark to raise awareness about SR 7.
Well, Youth Spark gave me the education that I needed because, like I said, I didn't know anything about this. So they gave me the education that I needed in order to get a better understanding of what was going on.
Because lawmakers passed the Safe Harbor bill last year, this November's voters make a decision about the Safe Harbor Fund. If approved, the fund will tax adult entertainment establishments $5,000 a year to help human trafficking victims and survivors.
A lot of people may say this is not fair to tax certain, industries. But at the end of the day, we feel like that our children should be everybody's responsibility. And if you have a platform in which this may happen or that it may promote it, we believe that you should be passionate enough to help with the solution.
The Anti-Trafficking Council is now raising awareness to legislators and voters about how those funds would make the community safer.
A lot of times when I speak to people or educate groups about trafficking, they will say, well, it's not happening in my community. And I have to give them that second look and say it's happening in a lot of communities, even when you think that it's not.
Now, FGTV also talked to a human trafficking survivor who is now working with Youth Spark. We will hear her story coming up a little later in the show. Reporting from the state capitol, I'm Priscilla Ortega for FGTV.
Thanks, Priscilla. Alex Truteau is the Executive Director of Youth Spark. First of all, welcome to Fulton at Work.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Now, your organization has been at the forefront of this issue and a main advocacy group for Fulton County. Tell everyone a little bit more about Youth Spark.
We've been around since 2001, and we operate out of the Fulton County Juvenile Courthouse, where thousands of youth come through who are vulnerable, exploited, and at risk for trafficking victimization. We provide services to youth who are at risk and exploited, and then we also work to hold perpetrators accountable and make sure the public understands how important this issue is for their communities.
I know January is spent as Awareness Month on this issue, but Youth Spark works every single month of the year. What has been the organization's focus this year specifically as it relates to what's going on with the state legislature?
The single most important thing that we have this year for Youth Spark and really for all Georgians is to make sure that we pass the Safe Harbor ballot measure in the November election. It's the last ballot on the last amendment on the ballot this year in November, and Georgia voters need to vote yes so that we can fund victim services for kids who are affected by this crime.
How large a problem do we believe this is in Fulton County, but in Georgia overall? I know that Atlanta has a reputation as being, sadly, one of the hubs of a lot of this activity with human trafficking.
Well, this is a serious problem in Metro Atlanta, but frankly, it's also a serious problem statewide. And I think that's one of the misconceptions, is to think that this is only an urban problem. Fulton County being such a large county, definitely does see a lot of victims coming through. We have hundreds of victims who are identified each year in Georgia through Georgia Cares, our statewide referral agency for trafficking victims. But frankly, it's happening all over the place. It's happening in Savannah, it's happening in rural Georgia, and it's something that we need to be treating seriously as a statewide issue.
And on a day-to-day basis, what organizations and other agencies are really working on the front lines with USpark?
Well, we have dozens of organizations that we work with, not only who serve trafficked youth, but trafficked adults and domestic-born victims and foreign-born victims. And really, it has to be that way because there's no one organization that can provide everything to every victim. So a coordinated response really is our best bet, and so we're so thankful for the partnerships that we do have.
What is USpark's greatest need right now?
Well, our greatest need right now is support from service providers across the state, really across Fulton County and across the state, to make sure that we're providing the full range of victim services available and that we're also getting to young people early on, right when they're on the cusp of victimization, to make sure that we can prevent really noxious things from happening to them down the road. But on top of that, we have to keep these organizations supported on a year-to-year basis financially to make sure that kids aren't falling through the cracks.
I know the county in 2015 created a sexual exploitation coalition, and that's been a huge activity for the Board of Commissioners. Is that connected in any way to USpark, its mission, and tell me how you are involved?
Well, absolutely. We're proud to participate in that group and help out in any way we possibly can. The way I like to think of this is that human trafficking is an international problem that affects the United States, that affects the state of Georgia, that affects the county of Fulton County, that affects the neighborhoods within Fulton County. So we really need leadership at all levels of government in order to work together to effectively reduce this problem.
And I know this has been an issue that's been ongoing in this area, but one thing that a lot of people I think would wonder is, why has it been so concentrated in Georgia, in Fulton County?
Well, that is a great question, and I think, to be honest, we don't know all of the answers to that just yet. But we do know that many youth who experience hardship, who run from home because they are victims of abuse or neglect, will come to a major city in the South like Atlanta because they're welcomed here, which means we have an obligation to provide services for them in response to their victimization. So there are a lot of reasons, but I think that's one of them. And I think that speaks to, the great things about this city too.
Now, we're going to meet a survivor later on in the program and talk to your colleague, Jennifer Swain, who works directly with the victims. But before we take that break, really give us your final thoughts on this topic and this issue.
I think what matters most to me is really getting everyone in the state to appreciate that child sex trafficking is an issue that affects all of us. It has an impact on all of our young people across the state. It's something that we all need to stand together and take seriously as a local issue and really step up to provide the services that we need, which really starts with that election in November.
Alex Truteau, Executive Director of USpark, please keep us posted on your organization's progress and your efforts as the months go on.
Will do, thank you.
When we come back, we'll hear the personal story of a survivor of the human trafficking trade. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Fulton at Work. We've been discussing the issue of human trafficking in our community. According to the Urban Institute, Atlanta is considered one of the sex trafficking capitals in the entire United States. And the sex trade involves girls as young as 12 years old. We want to introduce you to one survivor who now helps other victims, thanks in part to USpark. FGTV's Lynn Vaughn has her story.
The money that I was getting from the men allowed me to put food on my table. It allowed me to make sure that we had lights and water at 11 and 12 years old.
Dorsey Jones, who was able to escape sexual exploitation, is hoping her story will prevent others from going down that path.
What it taught me was, this is a way that I can help my family. So when I turned 12 years old, I had already slept with at least 250 men in my community. It wasn't because this is something that I wanted to do. It was something that I had to do.
With the support of her community, Jones received her education and now works with Youth Spark and the Salvation Army's Haven, Atlanta, to fight sex trafficking.
What we do is young women who have been caught in the life, they come there as a safe haven to learn skills to better themselves, to be more productive, and we provide counseling and life support, Bible study, liturgical dance, just things to empower them.
Jones says traffickers lure in children, but there are warning signs parents should heed. Be on the lookout if your children begin receiving expensive gifts from new friends. Take notice if they suddenly get a tattoo. Recruiters also lure in victims with promises of becoming a model or a rapper.
We want it to go away, but realistically, I can't say that it's going to go away, but what I can say is I can fight until I lose conscience and die.
If you also want to help in the fight against sex trafficking, visit the website youth-spark.org. Reporting for FGTV, I'm Lynn Vaughn.
Thank you, Lynn. Jennifer Swain is also with Youth Spark, and she's no stranger to us here at FGTV. First of all, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk a little bit more about Dorsey Jones. She's really out there trying to save other people's lives based on her own experiences with this issue, isn't she?
Yes, and I think it's phenomenal anytime you have women who can stand up and say, yes, it happened to me. I can use my experience to help someone else. It really empowers our young people to not have to go through that guilt and that shame that so many of them face.
And you kind of went into this issue just a little bit, but why do you see it as important for other victims to hear those sort of survivor stories?
Well, from what we know about sexual abuse, there is a huge stigma associated with it. There's a huge amount of blame, especially with young people, and they think that it was their fault or that they could have done something different. And one of the things that we know from working with young girls through our Youth Spark Voices program is that many of them don't think that this is prostitution. Many young people who are being exploited, being victimized by adults in their life, they really think that this is their normal and they're just doing what they have to do.
Now, statistically, what are we seeing here in Fulton County? Give us some idea of how serious an issue this is in Atlanta and Fulton County overall.
I think it's really important to know that there's a lot of different stats out there, and it's really hard to understand where the victims are, where they're from, where all of their victimization takes place. But we do know from previous research studies that somewhere between 200 and 500 girls are commercially sexually exploited every month. And we do have new research on male victimization that you can see on our website as well. But whether we have one victim or whether we have 50 victims, we know that this is not a reality our kids should face, and it's worth the work.
Now, how are these young people first lured into the trade?
I think a lot of people, look at TV shows like Law and Order, Special Victims, or movies like Taken, and they think the only children at risk are those who are going to get snatched. But what we really know is that there's usually a grooming process that's very slow, very familiar to the child, in which they are groomed to do this. And there are a lot of different warning signs, and that's where we are learning at Youth Spark how to intervene earlier in the lives of girls, but also boys as well. And we do recognize that when they become disconnected from school, when they begin to have that first history of sexual abuse, when they are low self-esteem and they're just not guided or connected with community resources, if we don't step in as service providers, then we know that another adult who may not have really good intentions.
And where exactly in our community is this happening? Years ago, we used to hear about certain corridors, Fulton Industrial Boulevard, for instance. Is this now more of a county-wide issue?
It's countywide and statewide. We're very fortunate to have the former Hidden in Plain View report by former Mayor Shirley Franklin, but what we recognize is that there's going to be different hot spots, especially when you have law enforcement attention to areas like Fulton Industrial. You have other places such as Campbellton Road, the College Park area, in which they're thriving. Every time a spot gets known by law enforcement, you have to know that the traffickers will become aware and change their tactics. It's really important that the community know that one of the most ways that young people are vulnerable and lured is through the internet, and that's now the virtual street.
Now, when these young people come to you, what exactly are their needs?
Well, they have a lot of needs. I think the service and the clinical support that's needed, and some girls and boys will absolutely need residential treatment, but we also recognize that they have other needs, things that will help propel them in school. And that's one thing that we do at Youth Spark. We really want to make sure that there's no barrier for that child, but also that the family feels supported in that care, and that they also know how to readjust to that child living the lifestyle in their home that's free of exploitation.
And I understand to kick off your 2016 Awareness Month, you received donations from another nonprofit. Tell us about that and how that will help.
Well, on January 28th, we were really excited to celebrate Human Trafficking Month, and we partnered with the Atlanta Women's Club, and they have a program called a seated event. And what a seated event is basically is they support nonprofits who are seeking to raise funds and awareness, and being able to really work with that group, having their support and their backing, it really helped us to bring in a substantial amount of money that will go directly to victim services. And so we really appreciate the Atlanta Women's Club for their sponsorship and support.
And also understand you had an event at the Women's Center where they collected over $30,000 to aid Youth Spark as part of this work, correct?
Absolutely. And again, it takes the community support. We all have to hold hands. There's really not one nonprofit that's going to end this problem. But we have to make sure that we intersect with social groups and civic groups such as the Women's Club, but that we also hold hands with other organizations that are now participating in our new Anti-Trafficking Council. And that makes it important because there's a seat at the table for everybody.
And I guess my last question for you is, what do you think can be done both from government and from just average everyday citizens to help your efforts?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that because most community members, they really do want to help out. They really want to get involved, but some of them just don't know how. They don't know how to add value if they're not rescuing a kid. But I think it's really important to say when you attend an event or when you show up at the Capitol or even when you go to the polls in November, if you are voting yes for that amendment, it will absolutely help, and there's a way to do that. But we welcome everyone, if you're providing services, to connect with Youth Spark. You may be able to help a child in need by just doing that, and we will help to link any community service to a child in need.
Excellent advice, excellent advice. Jennifer Swain, it is always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. We appreciate you guys.
And we'll be right back in just a moment. Thank you for joining us for Fulton at Work, and a very special thanks to our guests today. Now, we want to connect with you online. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm Daryl Carver, and we'll see you next time.